That morning, the southern sky hinted at the arrival of autumn. A gentle breeze swept across the dusty earth of a South African wildlife reserve, a place filled only with the sounds of birds, rustling grass, and the silent hum of a world untouched by human chaos. But there was a sound that didn't belong here. Crying, fragile, shattered, as if it had fallen from a soul that had not yet learned to form words. At an unmarked curve, on the edge of a forgotten dirt road lost in the vastness of the wild, a small boy, about 4 years old, sat curled up. His shirt torn, arms wrapped tightly around an old teddy bear, eyes red and swollen, and his face, blurred by tears and dust. There was no vehicle, no adult in sight, no logical reason for a child to appear in the heart of such untouched nature. A place where human misplacement has no room to exist. Only one thing was certain. The boy was alone, and that loneliness seemed to call forth something far beyond logic. In the dense canopy beyond, a shadow moved, not in haste, not in hiding, but something very large, very quiet, and watching. The boy's cries echoed through the forest, reaching places human hands could never touch. Then suddenly, a deep, low growl rumbled from the underbrush. Not the growl of a predator on the hunt, not the growl of hunger, but the sound of arrival, the voice of something ancient. And from that place, Nuru emerged, a fully grown male lion, massive, his coat sun-scorched sand, his golden eyes like twin suns, fixed his gaze on the boy with a look no one could interpret. No one knows who was more afraid in that moment. Was it the little boy, who suddenly stopped crying at the sight of the enormous figure approaching? Or was it Nuru himself, standing before the only creature in the entire reserve, who didn't know how to survive? For a few fleeting seconds, nature held its breath. There was no one there to intervene. Only two beings, one powerful as legend, the other fragile as a new leaf, meeting each other in a language that required no translation. And like a story never told before, its first chapter began with a cry, and a growl that carried no intent to kill. His name is Nuru, not a name given by the pride, nor one etched on an ear tag or wildlife tracking form. It was the name whispered by Drake, a young park ranger, as he cradled the tiny creature in his arms one night, under a sky filled with ash and distant gunfire. Back then, Nuru was just a scrawny lion cub, his fur still damp with the scent of mother's milk not yet dried. His mother had been killed by a poacher's trap. No one saw, no one wept. Only Drake, on a midnight patrol, discovered a pair of trembling eyes hidden among the dead leaves. And he chose something most rangers are trained not to do. He picked the cub up, and didn't walk away. Even though he knew he might be reprimanded. Even though no one approved of raising a wild lion. Drake silently brought Nuru back to the guard cabin beside the research station. He fed him milk from a bottle, wrapped him in cloth, and every night, slept with one ear open, listening not just for danger, but for the fragile breath of the tiny creature beside him. Once, Nuru had a raging fever and lay motionless for nearly 2 days. Drake thought he'd lost him. But somehow, Nuru survived, by instinct, by sheer will. Or maybe, through the belief Drake had quietly placed in him. Years later, when Nuru was strong enough to return to the wild, Drake let him go. But Nuru never truly left. He didn't vanish into the deep forest. He didn't join a wild pride. Nuru chose to live on the edge, between freedom and memory. A place where he could hear the sounds of humans, without needing to step into their world. From time to time, people spotted a grown lion sitting beneath the shade near the patrol station. No growling, no threat, just watching, silent, as if guarding something far greater than territory. And that same lion is the one standing before the boy this morning. No longer the cub he once was, but a creature who had survived because of kindness, who had slept on cold cement beside a man, and who had learned that weakness does not mean defeat. Nuru was once that child, just in another form. And today, when he caught the scent of tears from a small, lost, frightened soul, memories of fire, blood, and warm milk returned, like an old song, calling him back to where it all began. The wind stopped, the grass no longer swayed, even the forest birds fell silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The boy was still sitting there, trembling, clutching his scruffy teddy bear like the last lifeline left from the world he once knew. His eyes were swollen, his throat tight from fear and loneliness. But now, he wasn't crying anymore. Because a giant lion was standing just a few steps away from him. Nuru. Nuru didn't roar, didn't approach with the decisiveness of a predator. He circled slowly, cautiously, keeping his distance, as if trying to understand the meaning of this tiny being in the world he was guarding. And then, their eyes met. One pair of watery, sky-blue eyes, wide and confused, met a pair of amber eyes, aged, steady, and quiet, not in battle, not in pursuit, but in a space where even time seemed to pause. The boy didn't know why he didn't scream, didn't run, didn't flinch. He simply looked, and in that moment, he saw something in the lion's eyes. Not fangs, not threat, but a promise that said, "I'm here. And I see you, just as Drake once saw me." Nuru lowered his body, not fully lying down, not standing tall either, a posture halfway between guarding and watching. His head tilted slightly, ears turned outward, as if listening in all directions, as if standing guard for the child, an instinct not taught, but summoned from within. The boy didn't understand why, but he felt safer than he had anywhere else in the world. Two beings, two wounds, one shared gaze. No one had taught Nuru how to become a protector. No one had taught the boy how to trust a wild beast. But in that point of intersection between instinct and memory, something deeper than words took place. And from afar, a mechanical sound broke the silence. The rumble of a ranger's jeep approaching. The jeep rumbled gently along the dirt road, red dust swirling behind the tires like wisps of smoke from a dream not yet faded. Drake, the head ranger of the reserve, still had mud on his hands from the morning patrol, unaware that fate was waiting for him just around the bend. He was used to mornings like this, tracking footprints, surveying the territory, monitoring wild animals being protected from the outside world. But this morning, the sky carried a different scent, a scent of worry, the damp smell of fresh grass mixed with an unnamed unease. And then he saw it. At a nameless curve, right in the middle of the dirt road, a small boy, clutching a teddy bear, sitting motionless, and in front of him was Nuru. Drake slammed the brakes. His heart pounded like war drums in his chest. Not out of fear that Nuru would attack, but because memories rose like fire over dry grass. Nuru, the child of fur and claws he once saved from poachers. He had bottle-fed him, named him, wrapped his own body heat into an old blanket to keep him alive through cold nights. He had watched him sleep on his chest like a real infant. Had whispered into his ear, "If you live, you won't just be an animal. You'll be something greater." And now, that lion stood in the wild, between the child and the shadows, keeping the promise Drake once whispered. Drake didn't draw his gun, didn't call for backup. He stepped out of the jeep and looked Nuru straight in the eyes. There's one thing every seasoned ranger knows. A lion never forgets the one who saved it. But it also doesn't reveal that, unless it truly matters. And this morning, for the first time in years, Nuru looked at him as he once did when he was a cub. Not with the gaze of a wild beast, but with the eyes of a creature grateful, and passing on something precious to someone worthy. Drake took a deep breath and stepped gently toward the boy. Not rushing, not trembling, just one thing clear. He trusted Nuru, and he believed this child had not appeared by chance. At that moment, the air felt like a canvas stretched taut by silence. Drake stood there, just a few meters from the boy. Nuru, the massive lion, towering like a wall of flesh and instinct, didn't move. Only its ears twitched at the faintest sounds, and its amber eyes never left the child. The boy sat still, hands clutched tightly around the fluffy teddy bear. His tiny legs trembled with every gust of wind. He didn't understand what was happening. Didn't know who the man stepping out of the jeep was. Didn't know why the lion, something so fearsome, hadn't hurt him. But he knew one thing. The air had changed. Drake slowly extended a hand, palm open, as if not only to reassure Nuru, but also to say to the boy, "I'm not carrying a gun. I carry only memories and trust." He lowered himself gently, like a father approaching a child just woken from a nightmare. Not a sound, only his eyes, calm, steady, reaching into the heart of a child who had just gone through something no one should ever endure. Then, Nuru let out a low growl. Not a threatening roar, but a deep, broken hum, like the background score of a film, a warning, a shield, a reminder. Drake froze. He knew that sound. It was the same sound Nuru had made. The night fire engulfed the lion's den years ago. The growl that awakened the instinct to survive. Not for itself, but for someone weaker. And then, the boy looked up, slowly, as if his eyes had run dry of tears. But his heart still trembled. His gaze met Drake's. The strange man, face streaked with dust, but his eyes, so much like the lion guarding him. A small step, just one, and then the boy stood. No screaming, no running, just standing, and the faint ripple of trust began to spread. Drake didn't smile. He only nodded. The moment where no one dared move had ended in life. Drake stepped closer, now just a few strides away from the boy. The child stood there, thin, hair matted with sweat and dust, clothes disheveled, and his hands still clutching the torn, ragged teddy bear. Drake knelt down, lowering himself to the boy's eye level. Once again, he didn't say much. He simply extended his hand, palm open, waiting, not urging, not commanding. The boy hesitated, but his eyes were no longer afraid. He looked at Nuru, then back at Drake. Something between them aligned. And then, the child placed his tiny hand into the large, open palm. No one knew who he was. No one knew how far he had walked, or how he had survived in this sanctuary, a place where wild beasts roamed freely, day and night. But just one look into his eyes, and Drake understood. This child wasn't just abandoned today. He has known what it feels like to be forgotten. Drake gently lifted him, feeling how light the boy's body was. Like a leaf, one that had been carried too far by the wind, and somehow hadn't yet been buried. Nuru still stood watching. No growling, no approaching, only taking a few quiet steps back, as if knowing his role was complete. Lions don't speak, but the entire forest knew that it was he who had protected a life. Drake whispered, "Do you know your name?" The boy shook his head, said nothing, but his eyes were softer. And for the first time, he rested his head on Drake's shoulder. Drake asked no more, because sometimes, silence is the loudest answer of all. In the distance, the sun had begun to rise higher. Its rays streamed through the canopy of ancient trees, lighting the very place where three souls had stood face to face, between life and something else. Drake glanced back one last time. Nuru was already fading into the underbrush. No turning back, no lingering. He left behind only a story that the forest would whisper for generations to come. Just as Drake was carrying the boy back to the jeep, the radio on his shoulder crackled softly. A transmission came through, the voice urgent. "Central Station calling Ranger Drake. Come in. There's been a report from the East Post, a missing persons case in the reserve. A family, but they say only 2 adults. No mention of a child." Drake frowned. No mention of a child? That didn't make sense. Where did this boy come from? And why hadn't anyone reported that they had a child with them? The boy in his arms still said nothing, but clutched the ragged teddy bear even tighter, as if he could feel that the conversation was about him. Drake responded into the radio, his voice steady, though tinged with a chill. "I found a child. Alone. No adults nearby. But there was. Nuru." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then another voice, older, more authoritative, came through. "Nuru? You mean, the dominant male lion?" "Yes," Drake replied, and he was guarding the boy. "Not a single scratch on him. We're continuing the investigation, but something's off. Drake, that family, they're not panicking the way they should be." Drake gently tightened his arm around the child. That strange feeling in his chest, that this wasn't just a case of a lost child, began to grow. No one gets lost in this reserve by accident. No child could walk through this wilderness, no tracks, no wounds, unless someone, or something, had guided them, or protected them. And Drake began to understand. Maybe this child wasn't lost. Maybe he was left behind. By whom? And why? In the jeep's rearview mirror, Drake saw Nuru, still standing at the edge of the underbrush. A golden silhouette amid the wild green sea. Not approaching, not leaving, as if the lion knew what was coming wouldn't be easy. And he was still watching, from afar. Still guarding, Drake drove in silence along the winding trail back to the ranger station. The boy sat quietly beside him, head resting on Drake's shoulder, his small hand never letting go of the battered teddy bear. The Jeep trembled over the rocky road, but Drake's eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror, as if still searching for the golden shadow that had vanished into the bush. Then, a slant of sunlight sliced through the window and lit up something on the bear. A mark. Thin, long, dried blood. Drake stiffened. This wasn't the boy's blood. There were no wounds on his body. So, whose blood was it? He gently reached for the teddy bear. The boy didn't resist. He only hugged it tighter, as if some part of him already knew that the bear held a truth he couldn't yet face. Drake turned it over. Near the bottom seam, hidden beneath the fur, a small rip. Not natural. As if someone had tried to hide something inside. A strange chill crept over Drake. He leaned closer, carefully lifting the boy's collar. And there it was. A mark. Hand-stitched. Not a manufacturer's label. Not a name. A circle, slashed through with a single diagonal line. Drake had seen it before. In an investigation just last year. A ring used by traffickers. A code to mark children assigned under a contract. Drake swallowed hard. Now it was clear. This boy wasn't just left behind. He had been chosen for something far darker. And Nuru, the lion, had stood between that darkness and the boy. Not with claws, not with fangs, but with a sacred instinct. Older and deeper than any weapon. The radio crackled to life again. Ranger station to Drake, you need to return ASAP. We recovered footage from the forest cam. A suspicious figure left the east post around 3 a.m. Drake replied, his voice low but firm. I'm on my way. And I think we didn't just save a child tonight. We may have stopped a disappearance from becoming something that would have cost us our humanity. Just before turning into the ranger station, Drake brought the Jeep to a gentle stop. Not because of engine trouble. Not because the radio told him to. But because the boy was staring out the window. His gaze no longer held fear. It held something deeper. A stillness. Like he sensed an ending was near. And there, rising slowly from the tall grass on the other side of the dirt road, a golden silhouette emerged. Nuru. He didn't charge. He didn't roar. He simply stood there. Tall. Silent. Like a sentinel guarding the gates to some unseen world. Drake stepped out of the Jeep first. Then softly opened the passenger door. The boy didn't need to be called. He stepped down on his own. Carefully. Slowly. He walked toward Nuru. Each step as quiet as the forest breathing after a storm. No one told him to. No one taught him how. But in that moment, he and the lion moved like souls who had once known each other. In another time, another life, he stood before Nuru. They simply looked at each other. No touch. No words. Just stillness. But anyone standing nearby could feel it. A silence flowing between them. Like time itself had slowed to make space for something sacred. Then the boy lifted the torn teddy bear and gently placed it on the ground, right before Nuru. In his own quiet way, he was returning the most sacred thing he had. And Nuru? He didn't bow. He didn't take the bear. He only let out a low, soft growl. Not a warning, but an acknowledgement. Drake's fingers curled tightly in front of him. In all his years as a ranger, he'd witnessed many moments between humans and wild creatures. But never a farewell. That brought tears to his eyes. Not from sorrow, but from the simple truth that sometimes, the wildest instincts are the safest refuge for a soul that's never known protection. The boy turned back toward Drake. He said nothing, but his eyes held something that hadn't been there before. Trust. And behind them, bathed in the soft orange of the setting sun, Nuru turned slowly and disappeared into the forest's deep embrace. Like a silent guardian of life itself. Back at the ranger station, Drake handed the boy over to the medics. A nurse, trying to keep her voice calm, leaned closer and whispered, "He's not injured, not physically, at least, but this isn't just hunger. It's starvation." Drake said nothing, just nodded and walked straight into the surveillance room. David, his longtime colleague, was already waiting, eyes tight with worry. "You need to see this," David said, voice rough with restraint. The screen flickered to life. It was a clip from the Eastern Thermal Cam. Timestamped 3:07 a.m. The first thing visible. A silver pickup truck. License plates, obscured. The driver? Wearing a heavy coat. Hood up. Head bowed. From the back door, a man stepped out, holding a sleeping child. No panic. No hesitation. He moved like someone fulfilling a routine. But instead of heading toward the rescue center, like the family later claimed, he veered off-road and placed the child gently at the edge of a dirt path, right beside the hunting grounds of Nuru. Then he walked away, got back in the truck, and vanished into the trees. Drake's hand clenched into a fist. His voice was low, but shaking. This wasn't a case of someone getting lost. This was abandonment. David nodded, still staring at the screen. You see the symbol on the teddy bear? He asked. Same one the Bureau flagged last year. Child trafficking ring. They're not just working in cities anymore. They've started using the reserves, where surveillance is thinner and suspicion is low. Drake's chest burned, not just with anger, but with something deeper. A quiet storm of realization. That boy, he wasn't saved by law enforcement. Not by any human hand. He was saved by a lion. Nuru. The radio crackled again. We've got thermal movement up north. Unauthorized vehicle. No tracking permit. It's moving deeper into the reserve. Drake grabbed his flashlight, his secured rifle, and a folded map. I'm going, he said. David's voice turned sharp. You sure? That part of the forest is dangerous. If it's really them, they won't be unarmed. Drake paused only to glance once at the boy, now sleeping peacefully under a light blanket. He knelt, whispering just loud enough for the room, and the soul sleeping in it, to hear. We're not leaving anyone else behind anymore. You hear me? Then he turned, and walked out, into the trees, into the night, into the part of the forest where truth was still hiding in the dark. Night fell over the reserve like a curtain of ink, thick and absolute. Drake moved carefully, his flashlight slicing through every thicket, every shadowed grove. The wind carried more than the scent of damp earth. It carried metal, cold, sharp, the scent of weapons. He knew they were close. The GPS tracker pinged, heat signatures 3 miles north of the station. But they flickered, as if someone had cut the signal, or disappeared, into the forest. Drake stopped beside a rock hollow. Under the moon's faint light, fresh tire tracks pressed into the wet soil. And something else, a small handkerchief, embroidered with a single letter, M, stained with dried blood. His chest tightened. This wasn't about one child. There were others. And tonight might be the night they were meant to be delivered. He pushed forward, heart pounding like a warning drum in his ears. Then, a sound broke the silence. Not footsteps, not gunfire. A growl, low, deep, resonating like thunder through the roots of the trees. Nuru. Drake turned his light toward the sound, and froze. In the clearing beneath the moonlight, Nuru stood in front of a silver pickup truck. The same one from the camera. 2 men leapt out, machetes and tactical flashlights in hand. One shouted, "Get out of the way, you beast!" But Nuru didn't move. The lion growled again, long and fierce. Trees trembled in its wake. Drake didn't hesitate. He fired a warning shot into the air and shouted, "Drop your weapons. Wildlife enforcement. You're already on camera." One man panicked and fled. The other reached for a gun. But before he could aim, Nuru charged. Not to kill, not to maul, but to stop. The lion struck with a force that flattened the man to the dirt. Then stood over him, silent, watchful, like justice in flesh. Drake rushed in, cuffing the suspect, then turned his flashlight to the back of the truck. Inside, a locked crate. 2 children, trembling, terrified, alive. They had been saved. And no one could have predicted that the first being to stand between them and death was a lion. The end. Or a new beginning. The story of Nuru spread across South Africa. And then the world. Few believed it at first. That a lion could protect human children. Until they saw the footage. Until they heard the voice of Ranger Drake. A new sign now stands at the entrance of the reserve. Nuru, the guardian soul of the deep forest. Not all wild things hunt. Some come to save. As for the boy from that night, he's grown now. Quiet, private, but he keeps one old photograph. A faded image of himself, standing beside a golden lion, holding a torn teddy bear in one hand. When asked why he still keeps it, He always gives the same soft smile. Because that was the day I learned that even in the wildest places, there are hearts that still know how to love.